Welcome to a 1-hour Pallium Project archival podcast of a professional development event. The views presented in this session are those of our expert guests and participants from across Canada. In this podcast, Jackie Peden, an advanced practice nurse in hospice palliative care, interviews Louise Cadrin with Regina Capel Health Region's Palliative Care Services, and Bev Foster, a music educator from room217.ca.
I'm very pleased, Louise and Bev, that you're able to speak with us today. Louise, can you tell us, what is music therapy?
Thank you, Jackie. I'm going to start with the definition that our Canadian Association of Music Therapy uses. And the definition is that music therapy is the skillful use of music and musical elements as a therapeutic tool by an accredited music therapist to promote, maintain, and restore mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual health. So what I'm going to talk about today is how we use music therapy in the palliative care setting to enhance quality of life by using the music to address the spiritual and the existential and the physical and the emotional issues that can come up. Just briefly to explain a bit of our training, we have 4 years of formal studies. The first 2 years focus on behavioral, social sciences, and music. The last 2 years focus more on therapeutic processes and music therapy techniques and involve practicum settings that give us exposure to working with music therapy in geriatrics, palliative care, psychiatric settings, persons with mental or physical handicaps, and many more areas. Following that, we have a 1,000-hour internship that we undergo, and then we go through an accreditation process which ensures that we follow the Code of Ethics and Bylaws as stated by our Canadian Association. So our training ensures that in our practice we assess, we formulate goals and objectives, we implement treatment plans, we make changes to those plans, of course, when appropriate, and that we chart. And I think that's all I'll say for that, Jackie.
Okay, Louise. I was wondering, as you were saying all this, do you actually play a musical instrument? Is that something that music therapists, are they usually musical type people?
They are, and in fact our training, to even get into the programs, we have to have at least, I believe, a grade 10 or quite a highly advanced level on an instrument. And by the time we're finished our training, we have to be able to be proficient on guitar, piano, and voice. So it's very involved.
Right. So can you tell us, how do you use music in hospice palliative care?
Just to explain a little bit of the scenario with the Regina Capel Health Region Palliative Care Program, we have a 10-bed hospice here for people in their last 2 months of life, a 9-bed palliative acute ward, and an extensive home care program where we see clients in their home settings and then can provide a continuum of care that can range from home to hospital or hospice or to long-term care as needed. And I see both family and patient members. So the techniques I'm going to talk about now can range from very early palliative to end of life. Some are more specific to early palliative. Some are used through the continuum of that end of life stage, and some are more used right at end of life. And the first one I'm going to talk about is life review or reminiscence. And as we know, it's common for people who are palliative to want to look at their lives, to review them, to look at their accomplishments, perhaps what they're proud of and perhaps what they're not so proud of, and that there may be things they need to reconcile before they die. And music can be a powerful tool in evoking life review because we can hear a song and it can take us back to the very first time we heard it and the emotions that were prevalent in that moment. So when I'm working with a patient or working with patient and family members, we may use music that represents significant times in their lives, either individually or as a family. And so they may request a specific song, and they may listen to me sing it, or they may sing it with myself, and then reflect on the significance of that song to them. And singing and making music together in that moment can become another memory that they have. And what can often happen, too, is the music can be very evocative, and so the emotions that are brought up can become the doorway to talk about feelings that perhaps may not even have been discussed up to that point. So music can support spiritual beliefs in that it can help them to focus by singing songs that are a part of their faith. It's a way to help them keep connected to beliefs that they already have, because the lyrics can remind them of the hope and the meaning that these beliefs give them. And what I find with people is that they can become so inundated with medical treatments, medical appointments, how their life has changed because of the illness, that the coping techniques that normally they would be connected to, they lose touch with. And so sometimes the music that we use can help them reconnect to those beliefs. Song lyrics can be very important and can often speak to how the patient is feeling. What I find is that sometimes people just can't tell me why they just know they feel depressed or they don't feel happy, but they can't tell me what is underlying those feelings. But what I find is that sometimes people are, when they're unable to articulate these feelings, they may consciously or unconsciously choose song lyrics that actually speak for where they're at. And I worked with one gentleman who was quite adamant right up to dying. He just didn't believe he was dying. His family knew he was palliative. The doctor had talked to him, but he just wasn't able to admit that he was dying. But when I went out to do a home visit, and we were talking, and I said, well, can you think of a song that's significant to you or that has been important through your life? He said, I'd like you to sing Silver Threads Amongst the Gold. And the chorus of this song is, darling, I am growing old, silver threads among the gold, shine upon my brow today, life is fading fast away. And at the end of the song, he went, oh, I forgot that that's what that song was about. And when we tried to talk about those words, he wouldn't talk about them. What it told me was that at some level he was aware, and he did in fact die shortly thereafter, and died very peacefully. So one of the other techniques that we use is songwriting, and we use this to deal with the many emotions that people are feeling. So whether it's fears around dying, whether it's a sense of isolation, perhaps the patient is neutropenic and they can't leave their hospital room, and there's just a sense of being isolated and alone in that room. Whether we're looking at them grieving the changes in their life. I even say to people, we could write a song about how awful the food is in the hospital if that's what's distressing you in this moment. And I'll give you an example of this work. I was asked by one of our patients to see her 10-year-old daughter who was acting out at home and causing disruptions with her siblings. And when I met with this young girl, what became clear was that she was experiencing anticipatory grief. Her mother had responded to the treatment plan, and then her cancer had returned, and then she had responded to a new treatment plan, and the cancer then returned. And so this family had been going on this emotional roller coaster. And what became clear as I talked to this young girl was she was grieving for what she wasn't certain her mother would get to be a part of. She didn't know if her mom would see her graduate. She didn't know if she would see her drive a car. And in grieving for the anticipatory events that her mother would not be part of, she couldn't even be with her mother in the moment. And so when I work with people around songwriting, often what I'll do is I'll have them focus on the feeling, and then from that place, just what I call a free flow of talking. I just get them to say everything that comes to mind, and I just write it down, and from there we put that into a song format. And if they have musical skills and want to create the melody or help create the music, that's fine. And if they don't have any, but they have a song that they prefer, then we'll use the melody of that song. And I should clarify that music therapy does not require any sort of musical skills on the part of our clients. It's a therapy that can be done with anyone. So the song that she chose was We Will Rock You. And so what I'm going to do is read the verses of her song. And the first verse is, it's hard with my mom having cancer because you don't know how long she's going to live. If she's going to be there for all the big events like grad, marriage, and first date, singing, my mom has up and down days. My mom has up and down days. The second verse, I think about how long my mom will be here. Sometimes it worries me, sometimes it doesn't. When I'm worried, I try and take my mind off of it. Sometimes I phone my friends and talk in MSN, singing, my mom has cancer. My mom has cancer. The third verse, I'm going to take time from soccer and dance, and my mom is going to put me into gymnastics. I'm happy because it's something I really want to do. I've been asking her for ages, and she says that's cool. Singing, my mom has up and down days. My mom has cancer. One of the things I just want you to notice about this is how the first two verses really focus on the future and the worries about what will her mom be able to be present for. But there's already a shift that's taken place by the third verse. And in the third verse, she's already focusing again in the here and now and being with her mom in the present. When I met with this girl 2 weeks later and asked her how she was doing with these emotions, her response was that she hadn't really been thinking about them. And her mother also acknowledged that she was less confrontative at home. So that just gives an example of how sometimes using this creative process, another way of working through these emotions, can help diffuse and release the emotions. One of the other things is we have some really good digital audio recording equipment that allows us to record and make CDs, and then they can personalize the CD and put their own picture on it, and so they have a physical object of the work that they're also going through, and they're often very proud of that. One of the other techniques that we use are relaxation and visualization techniques with live music, and this is something that I would use with patients who are having pain management issues, shortness of breath, nausea, or for giving the patient respite from just their ongoing thoughts and anxiety. And the premise of this is by offering another stimuli for the brain to focus on. It's not that it takes the pain or nausea away, but it decreases the perception. And the way I do this is I'll ask for an image from them of something that gives a sense of support or peacefulness or hope. So it could be sitting with their cat on their lap purring. It's really something that's specific to them. And then we go through a relaxation of the body, and then I bring this focus or this image back and ask them to focus on it while the music is playing and while they continue to listen to my voice. And then I use affirmations that remind them of their own wisdom, their own courage, and that even though they have cancer, they are so much bigger than their cancer. And so again, it goes back to how can we keep reconnecting them with the support systems that they have that help them cope. And before I start the relaxation, I always take time to understand what their own religious or spiritual beliefs are, if they have any, so that these can be incorporated into the visualization also. And this is a technique, if this is something that works in our session and they like, then I'll make a CD that they can use on their own time. And this can be really helpful with medical procedures like chemotherapy. And it's based on the science called psychoneuroimmunology, which says that there is a connection between our thoughts and our emotions and the impact it can have on our immune system. So by having them do this technique as they receive the chemotherapy, and if we can have their thoughts and emotions in a place of support and hope and peace, then can that in fact help to boost the immune system and better receive the chemotherapy?
Do you know if there's ever been research that's actually shown that it has improved?
I think there has, but to be honest, Jackie, off the top of my head, that's something I'd have to follow up on in terms of articles and things that I could supply that with.
I guess I was just surprised that's actually even thought to work well. I know that people do it, but I hadn't realized that there was actually a formal name for it.
The psychoneuroimmunology.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay.
One of the next techniques that I want to talk about is improvisation. And improvisation is using music or making music in the moment. So it's not music that has been already created or songs that have already been composed. And this is work that I will do with children when I'm working with children, especially younger children who can't articulate what their thoughts or feelings are as well. What I'll try to do is help them to understand the many emotions that are common when someone they love is ill. And then we use improvised music as a way of expressing these emotions by playing them through the music. So whether we talk about different feelings that they might have, and then we have them, for example, choose an instrument. If there was an instrument that might have a sound of anger to it, if there was an instrument that might sound sad, what would that instrument be? And then we in that moment, will make music together that speaks for those emotions, but they're playing it through the music. Another example of improvisation is with a gentleman that I worked with a brain tumor who was referred because of anxiety and ongoing restlessness. And this gentleman was not from Canada, and as his brain tumor had progressed, he had started to speak less and less in English and was reverting back to his mother tongue. And when I initially met with this man, his anxiety portrayed itself as him rocking continually back and forth in bed and holding his hands up in the air for long periods of time and speaking in his own tongue as if he were speaking to someone. Sometimes one of the ways that I'll talk about improvisation today is through what we call the ISO effect, and it's using the music to meet the person where they are in the moment. And in this case, using idioms or elements of music that have a sound quality that reflect or match the emotion that we're seeing. And the idea of this is to validate in a nonverbal way the emotions the person is experiencing, and creating a holding space for them to just be with those emotions or to help move them through and sometimes to create a cathartic release. And what happened with this gentleman was when I would begin playing the improvised music that matched what I thought that I was seeing in his movements, his restlessness started to decrease, but what was significant is his murmuring stopped, and he would offer a short phrase in English. And what became clear after a short period of time is that these phrases in English were representative of some of the fears and anxieties regarding his family's welfare, coming to terms with his illness. For example, one of the first times he did it, he was murmuring in his other language, and all of a sudden what came out was, "The children, what about the children?" When I would take these words or phrases and play them back into the music I was making and sing them back to him, what he began to do was to engage with me, and he would do things like repeat the words within the same rhythmic pattern, or he would sing the words with me, or he would offer new lyrics and phrases. And so as time went on, these were some of the things he said. Every day it gets harder. Every day it gets sad. This is awful. Relax, it is not time yet. Help us, please help us. Let it be, I can't change it. Big mistake. So this became, not only did the improvised music serve as a diagnostic tool for helping us understand the base of his anxiety, but as he got closer to end of life, what I did is, one of the songs he really liked was Amazing Grace, and knowing that these were some of his concerns, I would take the song Amazing Grace and just hold his hand and sing the song but change the lyrics and just reinforce that his family was going to be okay and that it would be okay for him to die. Sometimes during the dying process I'll use improvised music, where I'll just use music that paces with the dying patient's breathing. And again, it becomes a nonverbal support in the room with the patient. I may suggest even to the patient that just as they listen to the music, to let it be a companion with them as it takes them to the other side. And often at end of life, I may have family members who are willing to be involved in singing and giving that patient the gift of their voice as that patient is getting close to end of life. And the other thing at end of life, the music can be very powerful because as the muscles in the throat weaken and that gurgling sound is sometimes difficult for family members to hear, the music can help with the difficulty of listening to that sound. Legacy work is another aspect of the work that I do, and legacy work is the act of creating something of oneself that can be left for their loved ones. And in our palliative care program, this is seen as a really important part of our patients' process. The concepts for the legacy work that we do are drawn from the philosophy of Dr. Barry Bain's work on ethical wills. And as well, Dr. Harvey Chochinov and colleagues in their model of dignity therapy also speak to the concept of legacy work as found within their model. What it is it's an important way of helping patients to clarify and communicate their values, their beliefs, their life experiences, the meaning of their life. And not only can this help them focus on finding meaning and purpose at the end of life, but it can help them to have a more positive experience in coping. And what I find is that often when people's identities change and the way they knew themselves to be with their family or in society changes, that sometimes legacy work can be a way of helping them to still feel that they're still contributing at some level. I'll just give a very quick example of a young woman that I worked with who was 30 years old and who had a brain tumor and was given a 3-month period to live. And her 2-year-old daughter, what was very important was that her daughter know her philosophy of life. She wanted to make sure that when her daughter grew up, she would know this aspect of her. And her philosophy of life were 4 words: faith, friendship, family, and fun. So what we did, again, in the same format, where like a free flow format, where I just had her speak all the thoughts that came up when she spoke each of these words, we went through this process and then we recorded the music. And what we did is on the first track of the CD, she left a message for her husband and her daughter. So it was her voice just leaving a message for them. The second track of the CD was the song. And what we did is we took the lyrics and we had them printed on a nice backdrop, and they were framed so that they could be in her daughter's room. And then on the front of the CD, we put a picture that was personal to her. So what was important about this legacy work was not only years from now would her daughter have an understanding of her philosophy of life and know these things about her mother, but she would also have an audio recording of her. The next method I want to talk about is the Bonnie method, and this is an additional 2 years of training over and above our basic training. And this is the work that I use with early palliative patients and dealing with existential issues, trying to understand why they have cancer, what happens beyond death. They may be questioning their spiritual beliefs. They may be trying to find reconciliation with loved ones before dying. And the premise of this is that we choose a goal that we bring into the session. There's an induction stage that places the person in a state of relaxation. And then they're asked to focus on an image that relates to the goal we're working on. And classical music is started. It's Western classical music that has been researched specific to this technique. And what happens as they listen to the music is that evokes images, and the images can be visual, thoughts, feelings, sensations that come from the subconscious and from the collective unconscious. And so by working with their imagination in its relaxed state, it becomes the bridge to working with a deeper part of themselves. And at the end of the session, we look to the images and symbols found within the session to see if it can give insight to the questions or the goals at the beginning. And this is a technique that I use with people who have good ego strength and who have, they have to have the energy and the physical ability to work on it. And that's it for now on that, Jackie.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned some very powerful techniques that music therapists use to help people at the end of life. What I'm wondering, because I know that our listeners are not music therapists, the majority of them, what I'm wondering is what can our listeners do? How can they use music at the end of life for their clients or their patients?
That's a really good question. One of the things that I always say to people is, does the patient or the family member have music that is important to them that can be brought into the hospice or the hospital or the long-term care setting that they can listen to? Because sometimes I've talked about a lot of therapy techniques, but really sometimes it's about enjoying the music for the music and the sense of joy that that can bring into their lives. And as I said, reminiscence, I mean, if there's songs that are important to them and it feels comfortable or appropriate to talk with them about those songs and seek out some of the memories related to those songs. People love to tell their life stories, and I think it's a very much a natural part of what we need to do at end of life. And keep in mind that they may bring up, these questions and these memories may bring up emotion, and are you comfortable with the emotion that can move into and just letting them be in those emotions? Relaxation, or to set an atmosphere in the room in terms of, if you want to use music that can help someone relax or set a quieter atmosphere in the room, consider melodies or music that's simple and repetitious. So Pachelbel's canon is such a good example of that. And you want slower music, so consider slower music that allows for deeper breaths to be taken. You don't want music that's too stimulating or evocative, so you don't want big rhythmic changes, you don't want big horn sounds. You want something that's simple, repetitious, and slower. One of the other things that comes to mind is I've talked about gospel music. Consider singing songs or using CDs of gospel songs or any songs that can help to support or reinforce their beliefs. And sometimes I say to people, just sit and take their hand and hum a lullaby or hum a song that they really like. There's nothing like the power of the human voice, or I think humming often takes us back to being young and being children and being hummed to by our mother. So it's a very simple thing, but it can be so meaningful. And the last thing I'll say is creating a sound environment. So in using music with the patient or the family member, remember to also allow for periods of silence. Because what may initially be soothing and comforting can become overstimulating and maybe even irritating if the patient can't get up and turn off the music or can't verbalize that they'd like it to be shut off. So let the CD play through once and then shut it off for a while. Or check with the patient, is that okay, or do you want me to shut that off for a while? And I think that's where I'll stop, Jackie.
Oh, thank you very much. Bev?
Yes, hello, Jackie.
Hi. Can you tell me what Project 217 is?
Yes, I'd love to. Room 217 is a musical resource that I'm making for people with a life-threatening illness, and it's not just for them, but it's also for their families and their caregivers. It really consists of 3 parts. Primarily, it has to do with the CD library that I'm making, and it's music that's intentionally produced and paced and chosen for the end-of-life journey. And we currently have 3 CDs in the library. Spirit Wings, which is a mix of piano, voice, and oboe. Gentle Waters, which is completely instrumental. There's no vocals on it, no words, and that's a mix of piano and cello. And Celtic Whisperings, which is a weave of harp, Celtic whistle, voice, and piano. So I'll come back a little bit to the library in a moment, but that's the main part of Room 217. Also, within the project, we offer Music for Life's Journey presentations. And these are inspirational and information, really, presentations, which include content and live performance. Things like the power of music, music and caregiving, music and grieving, music and hope. So there's teaching involved in that, but as well as live performance. And I've been presenting those in hospital settings, in hospice and palliative care outreach programs, in community groups, in churches. That's that kind of presentation. And then the third part of Room 217 is we're hoping to connect people who are interested in music and end-of-life care through a newsletter that we call Doorway to Room 217. And it's free, and we've released our first issue in March, and we're hoping to do this in 2 or 3 times a year. It's sign-up kind of newsletter, so if somebody's interested in that, they can sign on to it on our website, www.room217.ca. This coming summer, we're beginning pre-production for the next 3 albums in the library. One called Hugs and Kisses for children and children of the dying. Another called Warm Breezes, which we're going to target for boomers and especially women. And then one called Classic Comfort, which will be a mix of classical, baroque, and romantic melodies, which will really span generations and cultures. People often ask me, what is Room 217 in terms of the name? Where did that come from? And the answer is this. I've been making recorded music for friends and loved ones since I was 15. If they were sick, and on several occasions, some of my friends and family who are dying, I would make a cassette of their favorite songs that would help soothe them spiritually and bring them comfort and peace. But the Room 217 title or brand or whatever you want to call it, it really came out of a very personal experience. My dad was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma just about 5 years ago now, and we interfaced with a lot of the medical institutions in the Toronto area through that 18-month journey. And I was sort of a little shocked, I guess, at the fact that with all of the healthcare people that we had seen both in home care and in city hospitals and in the rural hospitals, that there wasn't really one person who offered Dad a musical resource as a means of comfort, as a means of connection, nor to our family. Now, we are a musical family, so in part that may be one of the reasons why, but it made me wonder whether, why that perhaps was. Now, as I say, he came from outside a big city center in a rural area, and there are no music therapists in our area. And I wish we could have Louise's in every hospital and continuing care facility in the country, but we're not quite there yet with music therapy. It's coming along, and I think today's a great venue just to promote awareness of music therapy. Anyway, the long and the short of it was when my dad passed away, music played such a significant spot in that time. All of my siblings and my mom and I were around his bedside, and we really sang him through the transition. And I saw with my own eyes and experienced with my own heart that evening that music actually led the way in Dad's transition. He and I had connected quite powerfully with music throughout his illness. I would come over and play for him, and he'd sit and listen, and often we wouldn't even talk. We'd both just cry, and the tears really were our words in those times. We launched Room 217 in October in Toronto. We've had a tremendous response since, from hospices, from nurses, from families, individuals, from hospitals, from spiritual care workers, from music therapists, from social workers, and from recreational therapists. the applications we're hearing, I mean, the heart of why I'm making this resource really is for end of life. But what I'm hearing back in terms of applications, people, I've just even heard this week, somebody is using it to drive to their chemotherapy appointments. Just they find it calms them in the car driving as they have to go into the city for the appointment. Surely we've heard back families using Room 217, around closure and those last 2 or 3 days, and it's been very, very helpful in just bringing peace and calm into a room. And the other application that we're finding Room 217 is being used for is in grieving and in bereavement. People are using it, not just in the transition, but afterwards as well, and it seems to be bringing them peace and comfort and centeredness as they grieve. A couple of highlights for me around Room 217 in this project that I've been involved in is hearing how it's used, but just meeting people and seeing how powerfully it can be used. And one story a spiritual care person told me recently was she was able to use one of the songs very specifically and kind of in a targeted way as her patient died. And so it really was, it helped in the room. It was just her and the patient. So that was pretty powerful.
Yeah, it would be. So is Room 17 the room your dad was in?
Yes. Right, but the room could be representative of so many rooms across the country, and whether it's in an institution or whether it's a living room, often that's where end of life happens.
So you're going to be putting out 3 more CDs,
yes.
And you have 3 already put together. How is it that you choose the music to put into the CDs? What do you know? How do you know what to put?
Well, there's no definitive answer, this is music that you're going to use, but I'm going to tell you what I do. I want to bring people hope and beauty in a very gentle way. Hope's a big word. Louise referred to it. It can have a huge metaphysical kind of meaning, or it can have a very daily meaning, like I hope somebody's going to visit me, or I hope I can eat my dinner, or, I hope I'll be able to sleep tonight. So I'm using songs that are hopeful, and songs that are relational, that will speak to connection, songs that are reminiscent to help, as Louise mentioned about life review, and songs that have the capacity to speak words that may be difficult to speak, that may be the words for somebody. So I use Broadway music, folk, pop, country, spiritual music, classical music. I tend to choose songs that have beautiful melodies because we do have evidence that melody is processed through the limbic system, which is our emotional center and core. So I want beautiful melodies, well-shaped, that are timeless, and also that do bring association, as Louise referred to, into relationships and memories. So, and I choose to do the music in a very gentle way. It's all acoustic, with wonderful musicians who can cross the styles. And the music is deliberately paced to slower breathing, and it's never bumpy or angled. On these first 3 albums, I'm targeting really the over 70 population. Stats Canada claims that 76% of the dying population in Canada is 70 plus. And then I just know, couple that with the high numbers of seniors in continuing care facilities who may have dementia or Parkinson's or ALS or Alzheimer's, or like my grandma was in bed for 20 hours a day. These people need resources and support. So I've chosen to target these first 3 albums towards that age group, although we do find that the families of this age group, no matter kind of what age they are enjoying the songs. So I surveyed some seniors, and over 100 of them responded to these questions. If you had 1 month to live, what songs would you like to listen to? And if you had 1 month to live, what spiritual songs would you like to listen to? And coupled that, the answers from that with my own experience, I created a song list. Then we recorded a demo of Spirit Wings, and I had a consumer focus group and a healthcare focus group listen to both, the content of the songs and the way we recorded, and got some really tremendous feedback. We did some tweaking, and then we launched the first 3 last September, or I guess last October. I think in terms of choosing music, it's a very personal thing. Whether you're actively living or whether you're actively dying, music is often preferential. One palliative doctor told me he had an 18-year-old died of heavy metal. My next-door neighbor passed away this past February, and he loved music. But, in the last 3 to 4 months, he could not listen to music, and he just couldn't hear sound. And I'm sure there's a number of reasons why. One music therapist in the Vancouver area was telling me that she was working with a woman who was in the end-of-life stages and just, played her guitar very, very gently and created this kind of really beautiful space in the room. And after about 20 minutes, she thought the patient was asleep and sort of gently left. And the woman sat up and said, "Could you sing me Pretty Woman?" I think Louise has given us some tremendous guidelines on how we can use music. I think Room 217 is a great resource, but I'm not sure still there's always a formula, and I think it speaks to just the capacity of music and the capacity it has as an art form to reach out to so many people in different ways. I'm hoping Room 217 will meet the needs of many families and individuals. I just want to say one more thing. When my grandmother passed away, she actually used Room 217, and this is just a case in point about choosing music. The very last song on Spirit Wings is All Through the Night, which in my generation and how I remember and associate, life with All Through the Night was a folk song, a song in a method book to teach kids how to play the trumpet, that kind of thing. Well, in my grandmother's generation, it was actually a lullaby. And so, the power of that for her, she actually took her last breath on the last cadence of that song as she died. So, you can take a song which has meaning and association for one person, and it may have a different meaning and association for another.
There is a question that came from Carol Vogler from Edmonton. She says, are there any issues or experiences specifically related to the elderly or continuing care settings? Can we open it up to questions? And if Carol Vogler wants to rephrase that question so we have a better understanding of what she's asking.
Our first question comes from Denise McDonald of New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Louise and Bev, thank you for an excellent presentation. Jackie, it's Dennis. It's nice to hear you, and keep the palliums coming.
Yes.
My question is around the area of the sensitivity regarding music being chosen for particular individuals. And I've experienced a couple of situations when offering music that it's been refused. And in particular, one situation where it was a family member who said to me, "Music reminds me of the good times, and this is not a good time." And so I'm wondering if you have got some suggestions or some techniques to help get around that.
I'll answer it from a music therapy perspective, and then I'll answer it, and Bev, you just add on to this. But, Bev already made some points that sometimes where music may have played a role in the person's life at one point, at end of life, it may not play as much of a role. And I have had people say this to me that, because of the power of music to evoke emotions and memories, sometimes people just can't go where the music will take them. So the things that it will bring up, they just can't go there. If it were to just be a matter of offering music for them to listen to, I think I would just honor their decision that they don't want to listen to music. From a music therapy perspective, I would come from a whole different angle, and that's one of the things that I tell clients is that the work that I do with them doesn't mean that it's just going to be listening to music or just singing songs, that we're going to use maybe the music to look at some of the stuff that is hard for them to look at, or maybe initially I won't even use music with them. It might be a matter of just that information that they've just given about those happy memories, and they don't want to, that things aren't happy right now, would be a cue for me to help them look at what are the things that aren't happy and the normalcy of having those feelings, and let's work and move into those feelings. And then if they are able to work through some of these feelings, maybe that would open up an avenue for them to enjoy some of the music that they have in the past. So
I'll add a little bit to that. I think introducing music into a palliative context, I think today we've convinced you, and if you weren't already convinced, that's a wonderful thing. But really, that place is such a place of trust. And I think that's the first thing we just need to remember, that to even have the place to do that, it is a place of trust. Maybe, Dennis, you've already thought this through, but just to assess maybe music has worked before, maybe it hasn't, and what you're really saying is maybe it's just too strong, like it's just too evocative. It takes people to places that they can't go. Maybe if you don't have a music therapist, because as I understand Louise's work, and you're doing relationships therapeutically, right, using music, Louise, and if we don't necessarily know how to do that, and a person shuts down or locks or just can't go there, I think we just have to be really gentle and allow for that space to happen. And maybe, I referred to my neighbor. I know one nurse, she uses room 217 as a resource. And I remember she told me this one family was using it, and then one of the sisters came into the situation, and she said, turn it off, I can't handle it. So I think it's the sort of thing where it just you may not be able to use it as much as we'd like to.
Our next question comes from Gary Paquin of Edmonton, Alberta. Please go ahead.
First of all, thank you very much for this tremendously informative presentation. In my work in hospitals and hospices, I have run into situations where I may be playing a selection of music for one person in the room, and their roommate either prefers complete silence, or, in keeping with the theme that music is very preferential and subjective, they may have a bad reaction to the music that is actually somewhat soothing to the individual who's going on their end-of-life journey. I specifically have recently had an experience where I was playing a recording of Vera Lynn singing The White Cliffs of Dover, and it just about drove the patient's roommate, it put them in a very bad state because they associated very painful memories with it. I'm wondering if you could talk about timing and staging and being aware of how the music intervention affects people in the room other than the patient, and some things that you use to ensure that the intervention is targeted as well as possible. Thank you.
Well, Gary, first of all, I certainly acknowledge the challenge of having several beds in one room, where you're absolutely right. You're trying to meet the needs of one client or one patient, but what you're doing may, in fact, be affecting others in the room. And so there's a few things that I do, and one of them is I will always check with the other patients in the room and explain who I am and what I am. And is it okay if we have music therapy in the bed beside them? And more often than not, people will absolutely want it and say yes. And there are times where they will say, no, I don't think I could do that. And in those cases, what I will do is, if it's possible, is there a way we could have music therapy in a different setting? And I know you're talking about very close to end of life, but an example I'll give is there a family room? Is there even a possibility to wheel their hospital bed down into a private room where we can have a private setting and we're not influencing the other people in the room? The other thing you talked about was using recorded music, and so the only what comes to mind is, the obvious, can the music be played in a quieter way so that it isn't as disturbing to the other people, or can it be used with headphones that the person can actually hear that for just themselves? And I realize that's a little bit harder for you to be as involved when they have the headphones, but I think it's just one of the challenges of multiple people in the same room, and it's really about honoring everyone that's in that room.
Paula Miller, who's calling from Truro, Nova Scotia. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. We were wondering about the geriatric population, particularly those with dementia and who had no way of communicating with you in any understandable way. How would you provide music therapy for them?
I'll give a couple of scenarios. So the question, how would we use music therapy with geriatric people with dementia? And I'm assuming that we're also talking about geriatric people who are close or in the final stages of life. There's a couple of thoughts that come to mind, and one of them, of course, is what I said before about instrument playing. Is there a way that, if they have the physical ability to play any sort of instruments, is there a way that we can use improvised music that, pending whatever we're observing in their behavior, are they Do they seem anxious? Do they seem depressed? Are they getting along with the people around them? Are they acting out? Is there a sense of anxiety? Then it's really around, is there a way that we can make music with them in the moment that even though they may not be able to articulate what their feelings are, we can help them to release and verbalize in how they play the instruments. The other thing that comes to mind is if they are, even if they're bedridden and they're not able to play an instrument, but we're still observing behavior that makes us believe that there's certain emotions or things that are coming up, or family members are telling us certain things. Again, how can we use music that might match or might validate the feelings by meeting them again with what I said earlier, the ISO effect. So music that matches what we see. And even if they can't say anything, what I'll often sometimes find with people is, for example, there is a lot of anxiety and they're maybe not even that conscious, but their body language is they're moving in bed, they're writhing in bed, there's something clearly bothering them. I might use what I call Spanish idioms or East Indian idioms, and it's music that can be very evocative. But what I will sometimes find is that these people will calm as they listen to it because the music is validating what they're feeling inside, even though there's no verbal articulation of what it is in fact they're feeling inside. So those are just some of the ways that we would use music.
I've got a couple of things to add there. There's a wonderful study that's just come out from Queen's with doctors Cuddy and Duffin, and they actually hypothesized that musical abilities such as memory for familiar music may be spared in dementia. So it's a body of research now that I think it's something to be looking at. I mean, when I go into our local long-term care facility and do music, it amazes me that patients who don't remember what they had for dinner can remember every verse of Christmas Carol like in the bleak midwinter. So there's a lot of power in using music with people with Alzheimer's and dementia. I can tell you with Room 217, we've actually heard back from continuing care facilities who are using the music, both the instrumental and the ones with words, for locked ward units. And they are telling me that because of the way it's paced, it brings the agitation down. It really helps them sleep. That's practical, but keep your eyes open for those kinds of studies. I think it's something we're going to hear more about.
The take-home message, music therapy can assist patients and family members cope with many emotions that occur during the final stages of life, including anxiety, depression, fear, isolation, and grief. Music therapy can assist with the management of physical symptoms like pain, shortness of breath, nausea, and difficulty sleeping. And music therapy can assist patients and family members explore spiritual and existential issues common at the end of life. I'd like to thank Louise and Bev for joining us today and sharing with us how music can be used at the end of life.
This has been a Pallium Project Professional Development Podcast. For more information on the Pallium Project, including written transcripts of this session, please visit www.pallium.ca. PALLIUM.